Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to this meeting of the Northern New England chapter of SABR, held in conjunction with the Gardner-Waterman chapter in Vermont. Tonight, we have my very good friend, the brilliant and fabulous Adam Korengold with us. Adam is an analytics lead at the National Institutes of Health and teaches data visualization, the art of creating visual displays of data and information at the Maryland Institute College of Art. Adam has graciously agreed to share his latest research on the widely debated new rules recently tested in minor league baseball and debuting next year in Major League Baseball. I believe he's going to have some interesting conclusions to share with us this evening. Adam, I can't thank you enough for stopping by this evening, and I'd also like to express my gratitude to you for being our very first presenter up here in New Hampshire. How are you, my friend?
Thanks, Bruce. Well, I'm really thrilled to be here, and it's great to see so many of you that that I've presented to before that have really motivated me, I think, to keep going with this research. So it's really an honor and a privilege to be here, and I'm looking forward to showing you what with here. So what I'm going to get started with is to get to my deck up here, and we are recording this. I can also post this on my SABR profile, and this is kind of an evolving project. So I'm kind of viewing these presentations almost as a way to workshop some of the ideas here. So I can write a future article for the Baseball Research Journal. So I really look forward to your thoughts and comments on this, because this is an evolving thing. And I don't think we have many opportunities like this in SABR or baseball research generally to actually do kind of an active experiment with data. So as Bruce mentioned in his very kind introduction, I'm an analytics lead at the National Library of Medicine, which is one of 27 institutes at NIH. So that's why, as I mentioned kind of at the beginning of the call, I have a soft spot for libraries. And my job there is I lead a team that manages data and analytics for all the products that our library has. So making visuals is a really important part of what I do, and teaching people how to do that is also a big part of what I do, both in my day job and also in the program that I teach in at the Maryland Institute College of Art. So this is one of the oldest art schools in the country that also has a graduate program in data analytics and visualization. So a lot of what I talk about here, I also talk about with my class. And the common thread among all these things, and including the SABR research that I've done, is that we can benefit a lot from using visuals to show trends at some kind of segmented level. So when I do this in my day job, it's around products or market segments or groups of people. But when I do it for baseball research, it might be around, say, the Negro Leagues, which I've talked to many of you about, or it might be comparing one player to another, one team to another. So before I show you the actual research, I just wanted to step back and make a case for data visualization generally. So why is this valuable to do? Well, I think we're all used to doing baseball research that's very quantitative or very historical. And the way that we report what we find is we write papers. But the world that we live in is becoming ever more visual. And it's always beneficial, I think, to find ways for audiences to interact with our data and our findings in new and different ways, basically to tell a story in pictures. So if a picture truly is worth 1,000 words, there's a lot to benefit from telling a story in pictures. I won't get into the basics of data viz here because that's a 2-hour talk on its own. Or you can take my class at MICA, which is 8 weeks long. You can also read my baseball research journal paper, which just came out in the fall issue for more, and kind of more of a history around data viz. But that said, there are some sound practices that are always good to follow as far as getting started. And the first is to know your audience. So who are you doing this for? And by the way, feel free to stop me at any time here. So know your audience, meaning think of your audience's problems, challenges, attributes, not their demographics. And to think about what personas they might have. So often we think of our audience as a SABR member, but there are lots of different segments within that SABR membership, or we might be thinking about baseball fans in general, and baseball fans with particular interests. So as we do this, I use the example to the right where we don't want to talk about the demographic attributes that someone has. We want to talk about their personalities, kind of, their nature, what they like, what they don't like. And as you can see here, both King Charles and Ozzy Osbourne have really similar demographics, but I don't think anyone's going to accuse them of being similar personas. You might find it helpful to name your persona. So something like Diane, the photographer, or Jane, the Yankees researcher, but that might make some unintentional assumptions about genders and roles. So some people like to name their personas, some people don't, but it's really a matter of preference. The second most important thing to do is to know your data. And this is probably what comes most naturally to us as SABR members. But for anyone who's done especially quantitative analysis here, the key is to have a clean data set that you can link to whatever visualization application you like to use. Say again?
No, sorry.
Okay, yeah, no problem. What I've learned from my day job, where I work with a lot of software developers, application developers, database analysts, is that it's important to be tool agnostic. So it's not so much a matter of saying, well, I have to do this in Tableau. It's what you want to work in and where your skills are. So you can use Excel, you can use Tableau, PowerPoint, Looker, whatever you feel most comfortable with. And as I'll say in a couple slides, it doesn't have to be even on a screen. So there's a real big potential for hand-drawn data visualizations or painting data visualizations, drawing them. It doesn't have to be that fancy. It just can be a visual. And the third thing that's really valuable is to know your story. So anyone who's a student of drama or movies here knows that the way you set up a story is you have some kind of introduction and problem setup, or a call to action for the hero. And then you have a rising action, a climax or an aha moment, and a falling action, and then a resolution or next step. And it works the same way when you're storytelling with data. This is where I say that it doesn't have to be on a computer. So these are two data viz paintings that I did. One looking at Joanne Weaver, who actually had a higher season batting average than Ted Williams or Rogers Hornsby. She was second in the kind of post-1900 era only to Josh Gibson. And I think Oscar Charleston also might have had a higher batting average, but I just wanted to show four players in that left-hand painting. And then on the right hand, and Mark will be familiar with this. So we talked about comparing, Ricky Henderson to Cool Papa Bell. And so while Cool Papa Bell's data are in red, he had about 8 times fewer career steals than Ricky Henderson did. When you compare him to the 200 leading base stealers, he was actually better than the 200 leading base stealers in his career in the Negro Leagues than Rickey Henderson was compared to the leading base stealers and the American and National Leagues when he played. And that's what these lines represent. So you don't have to do it on a computer. So let me stop there for a second and ask, because I know I've thrown a lot at you. Any questions so far? Okay, let's keep going. So the main reason why I did this and what I wanted to talk about tonight is I wanted to do an experiment around the rule changes that are planned for 2023 in the major leagues to see, well, did they have an impact in the minor leagues? So the first thing that we do is we set up the problem. Minor league baseball, as we all know, shut down for the 2020 season thanks to COVID. And it opened kind of late in 2021. So 2022 was the first full post-pandemic season, also the first full season after the minor leagues had realigned and instituted rules in low A that were intended to speed games and increase scoring. So whatever you think of Commissioner Manfred, I won't get into that tonight because, again, that would be a very long conversation. He instituted 3 rules changes that were designed to basically speed up games and promote excitement, promote scoring. So those 3 rule changes were restricting the infield shift, instituting a pitch clock, and limiting pickoff moves. So the most direct result that we saw from this was the games were about 20 some minutes shorter in 2022 than they were in 2019. And you can actually read an interesting article on ESPN today. I can't remember who wrote it, but it quoted a bunch of major league managers talking about changes, how they perceived the changes and how they thought they would impact play in the major leagues. And Dusty Baker thought, well, I don't really pay attention to those. I just coach the games. A couple managers said that they thought it would be good, that there would be more scoring, there would be more base stealing. And so, we'll see what the data bear out about that, because Major League Baseball is now adopting these changes for the 2023 season. The data source here is Baseball Reference, which collects team-level minor league data. And I looked at 3 low-A leagues, the Carolina, the Florida State, and the California, and I compared statistics for the 2019 season and the 2022 seasons. As an analyst, I'd rather have seen more years to run this experiment. I'd rather have more than kind of 1 control year and 1 experimental year. But sometimes when we do these kinds of analyses, we have to go with the data that we have. And these are the data that we have. The other important thing to note here is that because there was a realignment, so for example, in the Carolina League, you had the Wilmington Blue Rocks moving out of that league and going into a new one because they became the Nationals high A affiliate, and the Fredericksburg Nationals stayed at the low A affiliate level, and that league, which was previously called the Carolina League, is now again the Carolina League. So I wanted to note that realignment does affect league size and teams, but we're primarily looking at league level statistics and league level years. The audience definition here is the SABR membership of avid researchers, and full disclosure, I'm really interested in your thoughts on this, but also the broader audience of baseball fans who are interested in this question and in interacting with the data. So I wanted to keep that audience fairly narrow in the sense of what the persona would be and what their interest would be, but also fairly broad. And we can certainly refine that over time. I also wanted to define the story, and I used a really simple framework here, which is situation, action, results. So what was the initial problem or question? What did we do to analyze it? And then what did we learn? What does it mean? And how do we go forward? So The problem or question I think we've already dealt with, which is we want to know what the impact of these rule changes was. And so the action that I took was I drew a number of spreadsheets from Baseball Reference, 4 in total. So for batting, pitching, fielding, and geographic locations, so I could plot them on a map. We'll see that in a minute. And then in Tableau Public, which is the free version of Tableau, and again, you can use whatever works for you. You can do this in Excel, but it won't be quite as interactive. You can do it in Power BI, you can draw them, you can do it in RStudio, however you want to do this, whatever works for you. But because I was using Tableau, I took these separate databases for batting, fielding, and pitching and locations, and I moved these 3 into a union table. So basically, because I had a common data element, which would be, I think in this case, it was the city and the league, I could tell Tableau to view any record that had, say, the Nationals team for 2019. I wanted to put all of those statistics together. And then I was also able to create a database of single A cities. So what happened, what I got was this. And after we go through this deck, I'll open up that presentation so we can interact with it a little bit. So I wanted to plot several statistics against each other. Pitching stats, which would be ERA against WHIP, offensive statistics, which would be on-base percentage by runs per game, and then errors and double plays per game, and then finally stolen bases per team by year and league. So a couple things that are really interesting that we see here just by looking at the static chart. One is that in 2022, which is the red here, there was a decline in pitching performance. What I wanted to do, I reversed the axes for pitching because a high WHIP and a high ERA are less good, lower performance than a low ERA and a low WHIP. So I wanted to correct for that so we would all be looking at the same thing here. So on base percentage, kind of a similar thing. The performance in 2022 was correspondingly better. So if pitching performance eroded a little bit, that should mean that batting performance improved a little bit, and it did. What's really interesting is errors against double plays. So in 2022, the number of errors went up. I also reversed this axis here, but the number of double plays per game also went up. And so that's kind of an interesting finding. These two results up here are statistically significant differences, which means that they're not just based in kind of a luck of the draw of the numbers that I got. This finding here is not statistically significant. For those of you who are into stats, the p-value is too high for the results to be statistically significant, but they're directionally really interesting. And then what we see here is that stolen bases went up quite a bit in 2022. In the case of the Carolina League, doubling. And we didn't see quite as much of a performance improvement in the California and Florida State League, but that was really interesting too. So what did we learn from this? Well, we saw that ERA and WHIP were up. On-base average and runs per game were also up. Both of these were statistically significant, so offense did increase. Errors and double plays were both up, and stolen bases were up, and we also know that game length was reduced by about 20 minutes. So the key insight here is that if the goal of these rule changes is to promote offense and make the game more exciting, then the experiment would seem to have worked. But this raises some really interesting questions, like how would batters be affected by the pitch clock? Because we've talked a lot about pitchers, but How would batters be affected by it? How would roster construction change to account for the reduction in infield shifts? Jason Stark had a really interesting article about this. And as someone who thinks about customer experience a lot, I'd be really interested in how these rule changes affect the fan experience, because if you have more excitement, on the one hand, that's really good. That might motivate more people to watch or go to the games. But if your games are 20 minutes shorter, they're going to be buying fewer hot dogs and ice cream cones and whatnot. So I think that's a really interesting question. If I had someone from Major League Baseball or minor league baseball here, I think that would be the first thing I would ask them. And if Perry Barber were here, I think I would ask her how this would affect games from an umpiring perspective. And so that I can stop sharing for a second and leave the floor to you and ask, well, what are your questions and what do you think about all of this?
Floyd Lapp here. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, so the first comment I want to make is a confession of my age, because there's a reason for that. I will happily turn 81 on the 30th. No applause, please.
Wow.
And I remember very well in the late 40s and 50s and on through the decades before we got analytically crazy, that players just played their positions.
Mm-hmm.
And what I long for on the item of redirecting infield shifts is a return back to the future, I would call it. And to me, it's quite silly to praise Aaron Judge for missing the batting title in the American League by 5 or 6 points when he hit 311. I have fond memories of Musial, Williams, and then through integration, Aaron and all the other greats, Clemente and such. So I'm a big fan of going back to infield shifts the way they were, not moving people around analytically.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm underwhelmed by saving 20 minutes on pitch clock and limiting pickoff moves. It's not anything scientific. It's just the feeling that it's much ado about 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
As long as we paid the price and are attending a sporting, recreational, social event, I'm willing to spend 20 more minutes at it. But I'm really very tired of moving players around and having announcers say, well, had he been there, he would have done this instead of that. So that's my take on it. But I praise you on what you've done here to put these 3 rule changes in perspective. Congratulations on great research. I'm just giving you my opinion as an old timer.
Thanks. And I think those are all fantastic points.
Thank you.
You know, because as an analyst, what I ask is kind of what's the motivation for doing this? And the answer that I've seen mostly for these kinds of rule changes is, well, we hear that the game isn't exciting enough. And I don't really know what that means. I don't know if that's something that's coming from consultants or market research surveys or, you know, polls, and how are those polls handled? Because, you know, kind of to your point, if the goal is to make the game more exciting, is the problem truly that there isn't as much scoring, or that the games are too long, or is it something about the presentation, or something about the messaging around, you know, the game? That if you go to a baseball game, it's not like a basketball game where
Right.
there's just, or a hockey game where the intensity and the music and the lights are really something to be reckoned with.
Right.
It's a very different experience.
Right.
And I almost feel like baseball kind of needs to sit with that a little bit and ask, well, you know, what's the kind of excitement that we're trying to promote, because the things that I think we all like about sitting in a game, you talk about the social nature of it, the ability to hold a conversation during the game, the ability to see something develop over a relatively long period of time, over 15 or 20 minutes in an inning, where even a soccer scoring play is something that develops, very, very quickly. And sometimes if you blink, you'll miss it.
Right.
So it's a very, very different experience. And I'm not sure when we hear something like, well, we need to make the game more exciting, it's hard to figure out what exactly that means. Because, if you want more scoring, there are lots of ways to get more scoring. You can,
Sure.
Make a home run 2 points, or, any.
Or keep moving the fences closer and closer.
Moving the fences closer or farther away, right.
Get a bloop.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one other thing, and then I want to hear from the others, of course. The rule that went into effect this past year, I believe it was, which is a little off the three that you mentioned, because you're talking prospectively, where if you call somebody into pitch, a relief pitcher, obviously, they must face at least 3 batters. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's nonsensical. And I don't mind facing one, and then for whatever reason, analytics or instinct, the manager and bench coaches, whoever, say, get him out, bring in Joe, and so forth. Mm-hmm. And so on. So in summary, I'm for Back to the Future. I'm willing to spend 20 minutes, 25 more minutes, whatever it takes. I'm in no rush to go home, much as I like. Thank you.
Right. No, thanks a lot, Floyd. Those are great points.
You're welcome.
Can I ask Floyd a question referring back to the 40s and 50s? The game was faster back then.
Yes.
Why?
My guess, and I've never analyzed this, but as I remember it, it's a cliche but true. The pitcher started, and that pitcher was expected to finish, and there was less back and forth, and even relief pitches as a don't hit me now, New Englanders. I'm from New York and I'm a Yankee fan. Shh, don't let that get around. And you can laugh at me, but wait till next year. Anyway, take a look, and we all know this, at the number of complete games that a pitcher like Warren Spahn compiled, and their Bobby Fella, and all the other greats from that era into the 60s and 70s and such. But now it's so much long reliever, short reliever, and a multitude of relievers. In those days, we had one fireman, they used to call them. And even those people, Constanti, the great relief pitcher for the Phillies in 1950, started a game in the 4-game World Series. Happily, he lost. As a Yankee fan, I have to say that. Joe Page, as a great Yankee reliever in 49, pitched the 3rd through the 9th inning, practically no-hit ball. So there was less back and forth. You were in and you were expected to perform and complete work, not go home early.
Mm-hmm.
I have no data to support that, but from remembrance only.
Yeah. I don't think you can overstate either the fact that we have television now, and
yes,
that the media environment has, and the fact that you have commercials and sponsorships and breaks makes the game longer.
Absolutely.
At least at the major league level. So.
And isn't there not a requirement that each half inning be 2 minutes apart from the next one?
I think so. Yeah.
They run a clock on that. When you're at the game, you see that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I could add first is, Floyd, we are an open and affirming chapter, and we allow all baseball fans, no matter who they root for, even if it's the Yankees.
I appreciate that.
But
I noticed we went blank there, but okay. There we are. Good. Thank you for the welcoming.
So I belong to the Fans at Bat survey group that Major League Baseball runs. When all of this got started a couple of years ago, there was a lot of questions asked of those who are in the group as to how they would like to see the game evolve. What would they think if a pitch clock came about? My response to that was the pitch clock has been a rule since about 1958, but just really never enforced. And everything that Adam has spoken about tonight, a lot of the other rule changes that have been proposed or instituted, including the Ghost Runner, were spoken about by Major League Baseball to fans going back to 18 or 19. So I would have to think that some of this thinking and some of these ideas on what's next for Major League Baseball came out of speaking directly to the fan. Today's fan who is, I guess, just getting into baseball, or maybe they're a little more casual fan, or maybe they've been a fan for a while and they're unfortunately younger than I am. They don't have the patience, for lack of better, to sit for 3 hours for a game like that, and they want to be more engaged with things as the game goes along. I would tend to think that many of these decisions were made with an awful lot of survey data and numbers that came through Theo Epstein's desk in New York. But Adam has demonstrated for us here, as far as I'm concerned, that the changes that are coming about next year are going to, at the very least, improve the quality of play that we see on the field in terms of the diversity of it. More stolen bases, hit and run. It's very interesting that double plays increased, Adam. I would have thought that with starting runners more, you would see a lot more fielder's choice as opposed to that.
Yeah. And also at this level, the players are 2 years younger.
Good point.
That's kind of an unusual finding as well. So maybe fundamentals are being taught differently. I didn't do a breakdown league by league for that, for the fielding. I don't know how significant those results would be, because you'd be segmenting to a pretty low number of data points, and if the statistical significance wasn't great, for the whole group, it's not going to be as good for an individual segment. But that's a really interesting point.
Double A, a bigger basis this year. And of course, I live about a half an hour from the Double A affiliate of the Toronto Blue Jays and the New Hampshire Fisher Cats. But I also live about a half an hour from a collegiate team that my wife and I like to go see in Vermont, the Upper Valley Nighthawks, and they do not use any of the evolving rule changes. And it was very interesting to see. You could see the difference in the way the game is played. Now, granted, it's two very different levels. You could see the difference in the way the game was played. There was a lot less daring on the base paths in the collegiate game, as opposed to Double A affiliated baseball. I'd be interested to see what would happen by instituting some of these rule changes in the Futures League, with the Upper Valley Nighthawks, things like that, to get players acclimated to these changes right off the bat.
Yeah, it's interesting, Bruce, that you bring up the collegiate game, because one thing that I noticed specifically about college baseball is that, going back to the excitement question that I think one of you asked, is when I watched the College World Series in in June or even one of their conference tournaments, it reminds me more like October baseball. But then even if you go early in a college season, like in March or April, and I've watched a lot of college baseball in my life too, they have the excitement anecdotal factor almost knocked down. And I think a lot of it is because what people love about baseball is truly nostalgia. It's anecdotes. It's people like us falling in love with the history of the game. It's leaning into nostalgia. It's leaning into a lot of things that it's hard to necessarily quantify. Is why people truly love the game, like Floyd talking about history and tradition. And so I think baseball, in an attempt to be relevant, is actually leaning away from some of the atmospheric, environmental factors that a lot of people enjoy about baseball. And that's one thing I've noticed at the lower levels is you sort of, people aren't worried about the shift or the pitch clock or anything like that. And they're sort of leaning more into, the crowd noise or, the ambiance and factors like that. So it's interesting. And Adam, I certainly commend you for putting together such an easy visual, for all of us to picture, because it's a hard thing to quantify in terms of baseball interest in what drives fans. That's something that I've researched before too, and in trying to figure out what a fan would take out of a 20-minute difference. Would they even notice a 20-minute difference in a game while they're at the game in person? They might notice it on TV when they're dealing with commercials over and over again.
Right.
But when they're in the crowd, they might not even care.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good opportunity for more research. And it's great that you mentioned that because, and I'm not, I don't normally, or I don't advocate for particular applications or tools, but my organization uses Qualtrics, which is it's a survey tool to collect customer data. And they're actually going to have someone from Major League Baseball there, it looks like, at their conference in March. And so it'll be interesting to see, number one, if his group runs, or if their group runs, the Fans at Bat survey, because that's one that I've taken part in, not for a while, but I've known about it for some time. But this whole idea of combining the sort of operational data of the field level statistics with the experiential data of what do fans actually think of this. And now that we can say, well, look, we're shortening the length of a game, is that something that you like or not? And what do the concession sales look like in the last hour of the game? What do Nielsen statistics look like at the end of that game? So if it's a good thing that we're reducing the length of games, do you see less fan drop off from the Nielsen statistics, or do you see more people in the ballpark because they're buying beer up to the 7th inning, or they're buying Cokes in the 9th inning? So that that's something where you can actually look at hard and fast numbers and see if the desired thing is happening.
A little off topic, but it gets to speeding up the game, so I feel comfortable raising this. I've lost track. Is the phantom runner at second in the top of the 10th going to continue? Or I know in the postseason it wasn't, but is that still going to continue in the interest of speed and getting home and getting it over with? In the 20
it came out of COVID, right? So that's why they started that.
Yeah.
And no, they haven't removed it yet. And I would agree to anybody that would say that. There's no reason for it to be in the 10th inning. They could push it ahead if they wanted to do that, but I think they're taking away by having it be. And the managers have gotten used to it, and they've talked about it. And listen, if you're a manager and you've got pitchers, you're going to use less pitchers that way. You're probably going to be in favor of something that's going to save your bullpen.
But going back to before, I know it's more than the 20-minute savings of time, but as long as I'm out in the Bronx or at Fenway or some other great ballpark, I'm willing to stay to the 14th, 16th, whatever inning it takes until it's over. And I don't have the stats to back it up, but I bet most extra inning games end by the wild guess 12th inning at the most. And these games beyond that are anomalies. So again, what's the rush? Relax, enjoy your friends. Stay out.
You're 81, Floyd.
So when you get home late and your better half, be it the husband or the wife, are suspicious, say, no, it really was a 17-inning game.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's my understanding that the Ghost Runner was not going to be used in regular season play this year. Now, Mark may have some information that I don't have, or maybe I mistook something, but I had thought that was going to go away at the conclusion of 22.
I hope you're right.
So I'm not necessarily
I haven't heard that. You could be right. I don't
I
know.
could be wrong too, Mark. So don't take me for gospel. How many times have I been wrong? Lately. So
I was in a Zoom call last week. I'm sorry. I was in a Zoom call last week where I believe it's Adam Goldstein from Baseball Prospectus, and he said it is going to be in effect, and he sees no end to it.
okay.
So I think it is going to be here this year at least.
Mhm.
Too bad.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I got to say that I see both sides of the coin there. The rule is actually the international rule. It was first instituted in the United States in the World Baseball Classic. But I've seen both sides of it where, the traditional aspect of the game is going away because, we're not playing to a winner, the same rules or whatever, however you want to put it. But I've also seen that rule really come into play and make some extra inning games to really riveting, where that runner on second scores, visiting team takes the lead in the top of the 10th. The bottom of the 10th, the home team comes right back, does it again, and we start it all over again. And I've watched some crowds really come to life with that rule. Now, whether you like it or not, and whether I'm right, wrong, or indifferent, is here to stay. But I think that going forward, the modern baseball fan is going to say, you know what, this is kind of fun. Let's go back to when I was a kid, when they instituted the DH. My dad was apoplectic. Oh my God, they're going to ruin the game. Pitchers have to bat. Oh my God. I don't want to pay to see a pitcher bat. But here we are in 2022. DH is worldwide.
Mhm.
Yes, well, I'll correct what I said a moment ago. It was Craig Goldstein. I must have been thinking that of my speaker tonight, but and he made one point on behalf of, if he writes for Baseball Prospectus, and I made one note that he said that one thing it does is it changed the Ghost Runner changes the way managers use their bullpen. That now no relief pitchers are seldom saved for use in an 18-inning game. So they basically, managers go into games with a Ghost Runner saying, I'm going to use everybody in the first 9-10 innings.
Mhm.
And interestingly enough, in the recent postseason, when the Ghost Runner was not in effect, as we all well know, there was some exciting extra inning games in was it the 15th inning or the 18th inning, when the home run ended it like the good old days. So again, I don't know what the distribution is of extra inning games, 10 innings, 11, 12, but my instinct says that most of them don't go beyond a few innings of the ninth. And it's more natural that way. Let it play itself out. And for those who are in a rush to go home, and to each his own. But
Adam, did you have any data on the success rate of stolen bases in low A?
I didn't, but that's an interesting thing to look at. I don't know if that's part of the set, but I'll check on that. Yeah, I didn't do it as part of this analysis, though.
It's kind of something I just thought of. It might be kind of interesting
Yeah.
to see the success rate, whether it stayed the same or increased or whatever happened to it. But,
Yeah. Well, and the flip side of that is the success rate for catchers and throwing out base runners. Yeah.
yeah, I agree.
Mhm.
Just piggybacking off what you said, William, about atmosphere. I really, I love going to baseball games. I enjoy it. But I really do find the collegiate league game that we go to the Upper Valley Nighthawks just to be like a true family-oriented baseball game, because you can literally hear the laces of the baseball whistle by as they pitch it. And my little guy likes to run out past the back fence and collect baseballs, and it's just a really nice family-oriented thing. You can pack a picnic if you want. It is, who does the admission? Because we don't pay. Who does it?
There's a local bank that has bought all the tickets for the year for this club. It's terrific. You just drive in. They tell you where to park. You find a seat and enjoy yourself.
And sometimes there's food trucks there too. So I mean, it just really is like old time baseball. When you talk about atmosphere, it's just lovely.
Yeah, baseball can do all of these great new things that we've been debating. But at the end of the day, we call it America's pastime for a reason. I think, Molly, you make a great point there. Sorry, Andrew, I didn't mean to jump in front of you.
It's totally cool. I do have a question, and we talked a lot about the shifts and one of the upcoming rules. Do we know what MLB is going to do when it comes to a 5-man infield?
Oh, I've heard nothing about that. Really interesting.
Only 4 guys on the dirt is what they're allowing. You can bring an outfielder in and have them play on the grass. So you could see technically a left fielder on a pull hitter to the right side come in and stand there, and they would just give up the outfield to the opposite side. So people will try stuff. They always do try stuff to make that make that work. And the interesting about the shift is, Adam, I think you probably know this, the evidence in terms of where they've eliminated the shift in testing at the minor league level hasn't really changed batting averages and run scoring that much at all.
Yeah.
And I tend to think that, so that makes it a little cosmetic. I'll give my little opinion is, the cool thing about baseball is you could stand 7 guys at first base if you wanted, and let the whole field be open. And there's no other sport that's like that, right? I mean, lacrosse, you can't even cross certain lines in certain areas and things of that nature. So baseball kind of owned that. Our guys can play anywhere, and they've taken that away with no evidence, in my opinion, that really is going to make a difference other than cosmetically. Man, I love to see a guy rip a ball into the hole for a base hit because I'm a baseball fan and I love that. And I do too, but it doesn't necessarily make it more effective.
Yeah, I mean, what I find really interesting when I look at the numbers, and I can, if you'll indulge me for a second here, I can share the actual list that I did. So, and of course, it's going to take a second to crank up. Okay. So if we're looking, and this is to Mark's point, if we're looking at on-base percentage by runs per game, so this is the trend line that I'm mousing over right now. You can see how close it is for 2019 and 2020. So it's not so much moving the curve up, it's movement along the curve. So the performance was still better in 2022, but it's not a higher level or a different level of performance. So we're not seeing we're not seeing the curve move up here, in other words. We're seeing a very similar curve and just movement along it. Same thing for pitching. We're seeing a decline, but it's movement along the curve, which is interesting from that perspective. And I did include a link to the Tableau workbook in the chat.
Went to a few games this year. I did not see minor league managers moving their outfielders around to defeat that negation of the shift at all. Everyone played in their traditional spots, at least in the games that I went to or the games that I saw on my MILB TV. So I don't know how much that's going to be used. Mark does make a good point. When they change a rule, they always try to find a way to get around that rule, whether it be an on-the-field rule or a collective bargaining rule. But I didn't see that this year. And I thought I watched enough baseball where I thought I would see something like that. I don't know.
Bruce, I'd suggest that one of the reasons is there is not the history for the players, that people don't know whether they're dead pull hitters or all field hitters, that sort of thing. The one thing I did see is Cassis. People did shift against him. Oddly enough, his power's to left and left center, but if he hits it on the ground, it's dead pull. And I think that's probably true of a lot of people, but
that's all they're promoting now is dead pull and hit it, 10 miles.
Yeah.
You're over the ship. Adam, I have a question. And I think we talked about this. So we're changing a bunch of rules at the same time. And without getting the multivariate testing, weeds and stuff like that. The fact is, are we going to be able to know what was more effective? Because, you didn't even talk about the larger bases, which primarily for safety, but they are 3 inches bigger, which means the bases are 6 inches altogether closer on the 90 feet than they used to be. And we see so many bang bang plays. How much of an effect will that have in addition to the not being able to throw over? So now you have all these variables happening at the same time. So at the end of it, I guess Major League Baseball is hoping to say, well, we didn't lose as many fans as last year. I guess it must be working. I don't know what the evaluation is.
Well, were the larger bases in the minor leagues at a different level than single A?
I think they did test it. I don't know where, and I don't know what that is.
Yeah, that's the only thing I could think of. If they were tested in a different league, but on the other hand, you're testing with a different population. Yeah. So if that testing was happening at AA or AAA, those are players with sometimes 2 or more years more of experience than in single A. So it's hard because when you're doing that kind of multivariate testing, you want to make all the other variables consistent, right? And I think Daigo asked a similar question, which is, can we know what the impact just of the shift was? And we really can't, because all these rules were instituted at the same time. So it's hard to isolate the impact of one rule change versus another.
I have a question on the bases. Is it from home plate to first? Is it 90 feet now, or 90 feet 6 inches, or 89 feet 6 inches? Where is the base?
I'm not sure if it's
it's always been. It's just 3 inches, 3 square inches.
Correct. That's correct.
It's what?
It's the same distance between bases. It's the width, not the length. So to speak.
No, it's still, the base is still square. They haven't changed the shape of the base.
Isn't the base now more rectangular if it's?
No, it's square. It's square.
Oh, it's a larger square, in other words.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an 18-inch square versus a 15-inch square, I think.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. I just learned something.
Home
But
to
there's still
first
90
should be 3 inches shorter, because it's home to first. The 90 feet is to the back of the bag, not the front.
Ah,
Oh, it's not the center?
No.
When you're laying out a field, it's 90 feet from the back corner of home plate to the back corner of first base and the back corner of third base
Oh, okay.
and the center of second base.
Okay.
So it should shorten home to first by 3 inches.
Should increase batting averages.
It should shorten
Especially
first to
for the
second by
fast
4.5.
what about the batting gloves? Sorry to get into the weeds of that, but
What?
I'm sorry to get into the weeds of things by bringing up the batting gloves, the running gloves that they use.
Oh, the
Not
running gloves.
I apologize. The running gloves. That mitt, that makes another difference.
The oven mitts, Floyd.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
There was the Athletic did an article on the dimensions of a Major League Baseball field now that the bases are bigger. I'm gonna have to go back and find that. I'll try to post it somewhere so that everyone can see it. But there were some differences in the way that it was measured between bases. It was very interesting to read. It was several months ago. I'll have to see if I can figure it out.
Yeah, Floyd, every coach I ever had told me, do not ever slide head first into a base.
Absolutely.
You're going to
correct.
break your finger. You know, it was going back to someone mentioned the Christmas Story movie at the beginning of the call. You know, you'll shoot your eye out. You're going to break your finger if you slide head first into any base. That was what I was always told. Unless, of course, you're being picked off, then it's okay. But yeah, the oven mitt thing, that's
in the
that's
Yankee
one of those
broadcasting team,
new
we're
tools.
privileged to have both David Cohn and Paul O'Neill, and they both join you and join me in saying what you just expressed. Why are they doing these head first, real damage potential?
Mm-hmm.
And many O'Neill claims they could have gotten there faster with the good old fashioned hook slide and all the other things that they did back then.
If it was faster by sliding head first, Usain Bolt would dive across the finish line, not run through it.
Yeah.
Because he's getting paid to run. The other guy's getting paid to do lots of stuff. Running to first base is not particularly one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And to follow up on what you say about the Yankee broadcast team, Floyd, it only makes common sense. You don't have spikes on your hands.
Correct. Right.
Got anything else for Adam this evening?
Oh, just one thing. Am I seeing those numbers right? That the average number of stolen bases in the California League is 300 per team.
Yeah.
Is 350. That seems like a god awful high number.
Yeah.
I mean the California League, they don't play 162 games. What do they play, like 100, 120?
Yeah, they play like
140
or 120 at that level.
Yeah, that's like 3+ stolen bases a game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, look at that.
One off. The Carolina, yeah. Although this year there were, and I just saw the Fredericksburg team, but they did steal a lot of bases. And that's average stolen. Well, that's the average too. Average stolen bases per team.
Oh, yeah. That means somebody had what 400 stolen bases.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I haven't looked at the quartiles for that or the medians.
That looks like a very much of a change over 3 years for all the leagues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things is that the catchers aren't as good. The pitchers don't hold runners as well. I mean, people's speed doesn't change very much.
Yeah.
But,
well, maybe that's an element of the youth that because of the realignment that these players are 2 years younger.
Yeah, there's no 40-year-old guys or no guys that are like 30 or 40 pounds overweight that are are in Class A.
Yeah, there could certainly be some anecdotal things. There could certainly be some anecdotal things in that number too. Like if you factor in potentially that, the catchers are being called up and down.
Right.
They're not doing a lot of infield drills with the same group day in and day out. Stuff like that too might lead to the communication just might not be as good.
I don't think that kind of increase is going to translate to the major leagues. I mean, the cost benefit ratio is a lot different too. I mean, you're giving up an out so you can get one base. You're not going to try to steal 300 times or 400 times or 100, barely 100 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, major league stolen bases are way down.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't even know who led the leagues this year, but it was with what, 50 maybe in one league and 40 in the other. It was really low.
If that.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that this shift, I think, has taken away the most exciting play in baseball, which is the triple. Triples are way down.
Mm-hmm.
But weren't they always more or less way down?
Pardon me?
Weren't they historically usually the rarest hit of them all and not prevalent to begin with?
That's true, but
as in hitting for the cycle, you know?
Yeah.
All he lacks tonight is a triple, and of course he'd fly out. It just wouldn't happen.
I think another factor regarding triples, though, are the dimensions of ballparks.
Yeah, very
Absolutely.
much.
Like
Very
Forbes
much.
Field used to have a whole lot of triples and polo grounds, places like that.
Even Yankee Stadium, for that matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no place that has power alleys that are like, 430 feet anymore or 460.
Yeah, and they're standardized too. That's
for the most part.
Research into that too. So.
Going back to this is getting myopic and off message, but while we're on this, when I started out as a Yankee fan, center field was 467. When DiMaggio first came up, I think when Ruth played, it was like 480. Mm-hmm. And now 408 is it. Yeah. And as a kid, Ebbets Field was 399, and we called it a bandbox. And if Mickey played there, but 408 is the standard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some fields now. I think in there one that straightaway centers is like 380.
Wow.
I mean, there's a power alley where it's 395 or something like that. But I mean, what is it? A straightaway center in Fenway? It's not 400. The triangle is, but that's not in straightaway center.
Mm-hmm.
Next time they run Ginfrido's catch on DiMaggio in the 47th series, take a look. In back of him was the 457 sign, left center at Yankee Stadium, and had that gone not even in but off the rails, Yankees would have won that game instead of losing it 10-8. But that's for another night.
Going back, Floyd, to your comments earlier to Adam about the length of games, and you weren't bothered by 25 extra minutes and so forth.
Or 20 minutes for that matter.
Yeah, it reminded me of a comment that I heard a year or so ago. It may have been by somebody on this call, but I thought it was astute, and that was that somebody was at a ball game and somebody was talking about how baseball wasn't as good as it used to be or as interesting, and said, well, why don't you like it? And the games are long, and said, well, is it that the games are too long or the pace of play? And it seems to me when what we've been talking about tonight and what Adam has been analyzed is that when you take these things, I tried to jot down a couple of notes here. The relief pitcher rule with the 3 requirement, they face 3 hitters, that might affect the pace of play.
Mm-hmm.
But not necessarily. And then the ghost runner, which we brought up, that would affect the length of the game. And then, if I'm correct, the size of the bases would really be a neutral factor on both pace and the length of the game. And the shift would be a neutral factor, if you agree with that. But, so it's like baseball's trying to solve 2 different issues here, the pace of play and the length of games.
Mm-hmm.
And all the things every solution is not, or potential solution doesn't solve one, or it may solve one or none, or in no case really both.
But I go back to attempting to answer, is it William or Bill? Highland, your question to me.
I go by both. I go by mostly Will. I'll go by William too.
And based on no research but remembrance, I said, and I'm steadfast on this, as a pitcher, you were expected to finish the blankety blank game. And as a relief pitcher, for those who remember Ali Reynolds, he not only started, but he relieved in the same few days. And that's where we're wasting time. People that can't complete their work and are not expected to. How many times do you tune in a game, whether it's Fenway or in the Bronx? Well, we're only expecting so-and-so to pitch 5 innings tonight. You know, give me 5 and we'll bring in the 3 and you know, there goes, and forget about the pitch clock. It's overridden by all these pitchers. And you look at the box score. Well, the so-and-so team used 6 pitchers. The 6 pitchers? Are you kidding me? Yes, 6, maybe more.
I can answer that in one word: money.
Yes.
If you're paying a pitcher $43 million a year for a 40-year-old pitcher, you're not going to pitch him 9 innings.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know Warren Spahn pitched this 15-inning complete game at age 42, but you know, you just that is the truth. Look it up.
Yeah, I believe
As
it.
a Nats fan, I'll say that if you're not careful, you'll have a Steven Strasburg on your hands. And
Yes.
you won't be able to keep your Juan Soto. So,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not bitter.
And
Mhm.
I mean, the one other thing that no one has mentioned is that the pace of play could be changed very easily, and it's through the umpires.
Right. Yes.
Nobody
Yeah.
Nobody mentions that, but the umpire can control the pace of the game.
Well, they can do away with
gotta remember that-
walk-up music.
Have a good night.
Yes, exactly.
I think Terry Barber has talked about that actually, right, Bruce? I can't remember where it was in, but yeah, she's talked about how, you know, the umpires have more control than you think they do over making sure that people are coming to bat and that they're not tugging on their shirt too much. So, but it's been such a pleasure to be here. So,
so while we've got a lull and we're kind of at the point where I think anything else for Adam?
Thank you for the research, Adam.
my
Yes.
pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, great.
Let everybody know before you go that I'm going to be running a meeting on January 3rd in conjunction with the Vermont chapter. We're going to be putting out some information on that coming up in the next few days, but the next meeting of the Northern New England chapter will be January 9th with my friend Eric Poulin, who will be talking about the found poetry of Jerry Remy.
Okay.
That has not been done yet with SABR, and I think it's going to be great. So.
Will the beautiful cat be your chapter mascot?
Yes, this is Gus the Saber Cat.
Beautiful.
Gus,
Hi, Gus.
every once in a while, just to make sure everybody is doing it right.
Mhm.
So there he is. There you go.
Yeah.
But
Adam, he did listen the whole time on his chair.
Oh, wonderful. That's great. I'm glad we got to see him.
I sent you a picture of him on his chair.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thanks so much.
well, I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. Thank you very much. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
My pleasure.
And happy holidays to all. And to all of
Thanks.
the
Happy holidays, everyone. Definitely.
Thank you,
Adam. This
My
was
pleasure.
great.
Thank you, Adam.
Yes, thank you.
Anytime. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Hi.
Gary, keep the Yankee background that you've got there. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You all.
You're
Good night.
welcome. Good night.
Have a
And
good night,
good luck.
everybody.
And Floyd, it's okay if people laugh because Yankee fans pretty much always get the last laugh. So
Absolutely correct.
it's been a while, but
Yeah, I hope 2023 finally.
we're still winning, 9,500 games every year. So
But we're not where we used to be. Anyway, don't get me started.
who is Floyd? Who is?
That's true. That's true. Bye.
All right, folks. Have a good night, everybody.